They called him the pirate, the madman, the ghost who fought alone. German soldiers laughed when they saw his eye patch, thinking he was weak, broken, finished. They stopped laughing when he captured 93 of them single-handedly. But that was just practice. On one spring night in 1945, this one-eyed Canadian soldier would do the impossible, liberate an entire city by himself, making the enemy believe they were facing an entire army. This is the true story of the soldier who refused to quit. June 6, 1944. The sky over Normandy explodes with fire and metal. Thousands of Allied soldiers storm the beaches, bullets ripping through the air like angry hornets. Among them, a 23-year-old Canadian soldier from the Régiment de la Chaudière splashes through the blood-red surf. His name is Leo Major, and while others pray to survive the day, he's already planning his next move. But to understand who Leo Major becomes on this beach, we need to go back. Back to a small town in New Brunswick, Canada, where a boy grew up learning that life doesn't hand you anything. Leo was born in 1921 into a working-class French-Canadian family that knew poverty intimately. His father was distant, harsh, the kind of man who believed showing affection made boys weak. His mother did her best, but in a household where making ends meet consumed every moment, there wasn't much room for softness. Leo learned early that if he wanted something, he had to take it. If someone pushed him, he pushed back harder. If life knocked him down, he got up swinging. School was a place Leo tolerated rather than enjoyed. He wasn't stupid, far from it, but sitting still while teachers droned on about subjects that seemed disconnected from real life drove him crazy. He got into fights not because he was a bully, but because he couldn't stand seeing weaker kids pushed around. Something in him, some fundamental sense of justice mixed with pure stubbornness, meant he always stood up for the underdog, even when it meant getting beaten himself, even when it meant trouble with authorities. Leo Major didn't know how to back down, and he never learned. When war broke out in Europe in 1939, it seemed like something happening in another world. But as Hitler's armies rolled across France and bombs fell on London, even small-town Canada couldn't ignore the conflict anymore. Young men enlisted by the thousands, driven by patriotism, adventure, or just the promise of steady pay during hard economic times. Leo was working odd jobs, truck driving, manual labor, anything that paid. The army offered him something he didn't even know he was looking for, a place where his aggression, his refusal to quit, his tendency to charge headfirst into problems, could actually be useful. He enlisted in 1940, joining the Régiment de la Chaudière, a French-Canadian infantry unit with a reputation for toughness. Basic training should have broken him or at least smoothed out his rough edges. It did neither. Leo excelled at the physical demands, the weapons training, the tactical exercises. But he chafed under authority, especially when orders seemed stupid or officers seemed more concerned with protocol than effectiveness. He got disciplined more than once for insubordination, for doing things his own way. His superiors didn't know what to make of him. He was too good to discharge but too rebellious to fit neatly into military hierarchy. What they eventually realized was that Leo Major was perfect for reconnaissance. Scouts operated with more independence than regular infantry. They went ahead of main forces, gathering intelligence, probing enemy positions, working in small teams or even alone. It required initiative, quick thinking, the ability to make life or death decisions without waiting for orders. For Leo, it was like finding a key that fit a lock he didn't know existed. Finally, a role where his instincts weren't just tolerated but essential. So when those landing craft doors drop open on Juno Beach, and Leo charges into that hell of machine gun fire and exploding shells, he's not just another frightened soldier. He's a man who finally found his purpose. The beaches are chaos incarnate. Bodies float in the waves, turning the surf pink with blood. Wounded men scream for medics who may never come. Artillery shells throw up geysers of sand and shrapnel. Men drown in 3 feet of water, weighed down by equipment too shocked or injured to save themselves. It's carnage on a scale that would break most human minds. But Leo moves forward with a strange calmness, as if he's done this 1,000 times before. He hasn't. This is his first real taste of war, but something inside him refuses to feel fear the way other men do. Maybe it's stubbornness. Maybe it's the armor built by a harsh childhood where showing weakness meant getting hurt. Maybe it's something darker, a part of him that actually thrives in chaos. Whatever it is, it will define the rest of his life and save hundreds of others in the process. Within hours of landing, while most soldiers are still trying to secure their beachhead positions, still processing the trauma of what they just survived, Leo spots something that catches his tactical eye. A German armored vehicle, abandoned but not destroyed, sitting near a bombed-out farmhouse about 200 yards from Allied lines. His commanding officer wants to call in demolition experts, wait for proper reconnaissance, follow protocol. Leo has a different idea, the kind of idea that drives officers to drink. He approaches alone, moving low through the smoking ruins, every nerve alive with adrenaline. German snipers could be anywhere. The vehicle itself could be booby-trapped, a common German tactic. Every step could be his last. But Leo has already learned something about himself in those few hours since landing. He doesn't freeze under fire. His mind doesn't go blank with fear. Instead, everything becomes clearer, sharper, like the world comes into focus only when death is breathing down his neck. He reaches the vehicle. No explosion. No sniper bullet. He peers inside cautiously, half expecting a German soldier to pop up with a gun. Empty, but not worthless. Inside the vehicle, he finds something more valuable than ammunition, more useful than another machine gun. German communication equipment, intact and functional. Code books with encryption keys. Maps showing defensive positions. Intelligence that could save Allied lives, that could help commanders understand German troop movements and fortifications. Leo doesn't just take what he can carry. He figures out how to start the damn thing and drives the captured vehicle back to his unit, grinning like he just won a bar bet rather than completing an insanely dangerous solo mission. His superiors don't know whether to promote him or court-martial him for taking such a reckless risk without authorization. The intelligence officers, though, they're thrilled. The information Leo brought back proves immediately useful, confirming some intelligence estimates and revealing gaps in others. Word spreads quickly in military units, especially about someone as colorful as Leo. Within days, other soldiers know about the crazy French-Canadian who captured a German vehicle by himself on D-Day. Some think the story is exaggerated, grown taller with each retelling. Those who saw it happen know better. They recognize something in Leo that's both inspiring and slightly terrifying. He's the kind of soldier who makes you feel braver just by being around, but also makes you worry about what insane thing he'll try next. As the Allied forces push deeper into France, fighting through the deadly hedgerows of Normandy where every field becomes a miniature battlefield, Leo develops his reputation further. He volunteers for the most dangerous reconnaissance missions, the ones where other scouts draw straws hoping not to be selected. He goes where others won't, does what others can't. His fellow soldiers start calling him crazy, but they also start trusting him with their lives. Because when Leo Major scouts ahead and says a route is clear, it's clear. When he reports enemy positions, those positions are exactly where he says they are. And when the shooting starts, Leo doesn't run for cover and wait. He runs toward the enemy, firing as he goes, aggressive to the point of madness. His methods are unorthodox, to put it mildly. Traditional reconnaissance emphasizes stealth, observation, avoiding contact. Leo treats reconnaissance as an offensive operation. He doesn't just watch German positions. He probes them, tests them, sometimes attacks them alone to gauge their response and strength. It drives his commanding officers crazy because he constantly breaks protocol. But it works. His intelligence is always accurate because he doesn't just observe from a distance. He gets close enough to count the enemy, to hear their conversations, to understand not just where they are but how ready they are to fight. Summer turns to fall as the Allied advance continues. Paris is liberated in August, a moment of joy that briefly makes the world forget this war's horrors. But the fighting continues, brutal and grinding. The Germans retreat but make the Allies pay for every mile of French soil. Towns are destroyed in the fighting. Civilians caught between armies die by the thousands. Young men on both sides bleed out in muddy fields, calling for mothers who will never hear them. Through it all, Leo Major keeps pushing forward, keeps taking risks that should kill him. His luck seems impossible, supernatural. He walks through firefights that kill men around him. He completes missions that seem suicidal. Other soldiers start to believe he's invincible, protected by some force they don't understand. Leo knows better. He's not invincible. He's just committed to not dying until he's finished with what he started. There's a difference, subtle but crucial. Then comes the day that changes everything, that tests whether Leo Major's luck is real or just borrowed time finally running out. September 1944, somewhere in the French countryside near the Belgian border. Leo and his unit encounter an SS patrol, the Schutzstaffel, Hitler's elite troops, fanatical believers in Nazi ideology, known for their brutality and their refusal to surrender. This isn't supposed to be a major engagement, just a quick firefight. Nothing the veteran soldiers of the Régiment de la Chaudière can't handle. The shooting starts fast and ends faster. The SS patrol is outnumbered, caught in the open, but fanatics don't retreat quietly. As the Canadians advance, securing the area, someone throws a grenade. Maybe it's a last act of defiance from a dying SS soldier. Maybe it's an accident in the chaos. The origin doesn't matter. What matters is where it lands. The explosion hits close, too close. Leo sees the flash, feels the shockwave, then nothing but pain. Absolute, blinding, all-consuming pain. Shrapnel tears into his face, specifically his left eye and the area around it. When the smoke clears and the ringing in his ears finally fades enough to hear his own screams, Leo realizes he can't see out of his left eye. Not blurry vision, not darkness, nothing. The eye is destroyed, filled with blood and shredded tissue. His face feels like it's on fire. Blood streams down, soaking his uniform, dripping onto the ground. The medics reach him within minutes, though it feels like hours. They're experienced combat medics who've seen every kind of wound imaginable, but even they flinch at the damage to Leo's face. They stabilize him, pump him full of morphine, prepare him for evacuation. Standard procedure for an eye injury. This severe is immediate removal from combat duty. Leo will be shipped to a field hospital, then probably back to England for proper treatment and recovery. His war, for all practical purposes, is over. Except Leo Major doesn't accept that. Through the morphine haze and the pain that feels like someone is driving hot nails into his skull, he makes his position clear. He's not leaving. He's not going to some hospital to sit around while his brothers keep fighting. The medics think he's delirious, in shock, not thinking clearly. They try to explain that fighting with one eye is impossible, that his depth perception will be shot, that infection could kill him if the wound isn't properly treated. Leo's response becomes legendary in the regiment. He tells them he's got another eye that works just fine, and that's one more than he needs to kill Germans. He says he can see well enough to shoot, and if he can shoot, he can fight. When they keep insisting, he makes a joke that catches on like wildfire through the ranks. He says he looks like a pirate now, and every pirate needs only one good eye to fight. Besides, he adds with a grin that must hurt like hell given his facial injuries, pirates are lucky. Everyone knows that. The eye patch becomes his trademark once the wound heals enough for him to function. It's not the romantic, swashbuckling eye patch from adventure movies. It's medical, practical, covering the ruined socket where his left eye used to be. But Leo wears it like a badge of honor, like a declaration that losing an eye means nothing in the larger scope of what needs to be done. Some German soldiers, when they see him later during prisoner processing or brief encounters before firefights, will laugh at the one-eyed Canadian. They think he's finished, a wounded man clinging to false pride, trying to prove something that can't be proven. They have no idea what's coming. They don't understand what Leo Major represents. The doctors eventually, reluctantly, approve Leo's return to duty after he spends just enough time recovering for the wound to close and the risk of immediate infection to pass. They monitor him closely, waiting for him to fail, to prove that fighting with one eye is impossible. What they discover surprises them, though perhaps it shouldn't. If anything, losing the eye makes Leo more focused, more determined. It's as if he's decided to prove to the universe that no injury, no setback, no loss can stop him from doing what he believes needs to be done. His superiors assign him lighter duties at first, testing him, expecting him to struggle. Leo throws himself into missions with even more intensity than before. His depth perception might be compromised in technical terms, but his tactical instincts are sharper than ever. He compensates for the lost eye by being more aware of his surroundings, by moving constantly, by never staying still long enough for the missing peripheral vision to matter. Other soldiers start calling him the pirate, and Leo embraces the nickname. He jokes about needing a parrot and a ship to complete the image. But there's nothing funny about what comes next, about the mission that will cement Leo Major's reputation as something beyond an exceptional soldier, something closer to a force of nature wearing a Canadian uniform. The fall of 1944 brings the Battle of the Scheldt Estuary, one of the most brutal and overlooked campaigns of the entire war. The Allies have liberated the crucial port of Antwerp in Belgium, but the port is useless as long as German forces control the Scheldt River leading to the sea. Without access to Antwerp's port facilities, the Allied advance into Germany itself will stall, starved of supplies and reinforcements. The German command knows this, so they defend the Scheldt with everything they have left. It's brutal fighting, cold and muddy, the kind of combat that grinds men down to their bones. The landscape is flooded deliberately by the Germans, turning the battlefield into a nightmare of waterlogged fields and destroyed villages. Soldiers fight waist-deep in freezing water. Tanks get stuck in mud and become targets. Artillery shells create craters that fill with water, drowning wounded men who fall into them. It's hell on earth, and the casualties mount into the thousands on both sides. Leo and his reconnaissance team are sent ahead to gather intelligence on German positions before a major push. They need to know where the Germans are dug in, how many troops they're facing, what kind of artillery support the enemy has. It's crucial information that will determine whether the coming offensive succeeds or fails. But something goes wrong in the maze of flooded fields and destroyed villages. Communications break down. The team gets separated in the confusion. Leo finds himself alone, deep in enemy territory with German forces all around him. Most soldiers in this situation would have one priority: survival. Get back to friendly lines any way possible. Hide during the day, move at night. Avoid contact at all costs. That's what training dictates, that's what common sense demands. Leo Major looks at the situation and sees not danger but opportunity. He's behind enemy lines, yes, but that means he has access to intelligence no one else can get. More than that, he can gather intelligence the old-fashioned way, by taking prisoners who can be interrogated for information. So he starts hunting. Moving through the German-held territory methodically, Leo becomes a ghost. A predator, stalking prey that doesn't know it's being hunted. He notes their positions, counts their numbers, observes their routines and defensive preparations. Then he starts taking prisoners. Not one or two, not even a dozen. Over the course of several hours that blur together into a surreal nightmare of violence and tactical perfection, Leo captures 93 German soldiers. 93. By himself. Let that number sink in. One Canadian corporal with an eye patch, alone in enemy territory, captures nearly 100 enemy soldiers. It seems impossible, the kind of thing that happens in propaganda movies but not in real life. But it happened. The official military records confirm every detail. How? A combination of factors that came together in perfect, terrible synchronicity. First, the element of surprise. German soldiers weren't expecting a lone Allied soldier to attack them aggressively. They expected defensive positions, massed forces, conventional tactics. Leo gave them none of that. He hit them when they were vulnerable, during shift changes, during meals, during moments when their guard was down. Second, psychological warfare. After the first few captures, Leo deliberately let rumors spread that Allied forces had infiltrated the area in strength. He moved constantly, attacking from different directions, making it seem like multiple units were operating in the sector. Confused and scared German soldiers started surrendering to avoid being killed by what they thought was an overwhelming force. Third, pure audacity. Leo herded his prisoners like a shepherd with the world's most dangerous flock. He used captured Germans to capture more Germans, making the groups he'd already taken march ahead at gunpoint, while he picked up stragglers and isolated units. The sight of their own soldiers being marched around convinced other Germans that resistance was futile, that they were already surrounded. And fourth, timing. This was late 1944. Germany was losing the war, and even the most fanatical soldiers could see the writing on the wall. Many were looking for a semi-honorable way to surrender, to survive rather than die for a lost cause. Leo gave them that option, and many took it, rather than fight to the death against what seemed like superior forces. When Leo finally arrives back at Allied lines, herding 93 prisoners ahead of him, his commanders think at first that he's captured a German unit with help from forces they didn't know about. Then they realize one Canadian private did this alone. The story spreads through the Allied forces like electricity. The one-eyed pirate who captured nearly 100 enemy soldiers single-handedly. Some soldiers think it's exaggerated, a tall tale growing with each retelling, but the official reports confirm every detail. The German prisoners confirm it themselves during interrogation, still stunned by what happened to them. The victory of capturing 93 German soldiers brings Leo both recognition and an unexpected confrontation that will burn in his memory. During the prisoner processing at a temporary holding area behind Allied lines, Leo is assigned to guard duty, watching over some of the Germans he personally captured while intelligence officers conduct interrogations. The German prisoners sit in groups, exhausted, relieved to be out of the fighting, waiting to be transported to proper POW camps. Most are quiet, defeated, grateful to have survived. But there's always a few who can't let go of their pride, who need to salvage something from the humiliation of capture. A group of younger SS soldiers, still wearing their distinctive uniforms, notice Leo standing guard. They see the eye patch, the single eye watching them, and something shifts in their expressions. One of them says something in German, too quiet for Leo to hear clearly. The others laugh. Not loud, not aggressive, but the kind of dismissive laughter that cuts deeper than insults. Leo understands enough German to catch fragments. Einäugig, one-eyed, pirate, pirate. More laughter. One of the SS soldiers makes an exaggerated gesture, covering one eye and stumbling around like he's blind, mocking Leo's disability. His companions find this hilarious, laughing harder now, emboldened by the group dynamic even in captivity. They think Leo can't understand them. Or maybe they don't care. They see a wounded soldier, diminished, less than whole. They see weakness where they should see danger. One of them, bolder than the rest, makes direct eye contact with Leo and smirks, saying something that clearly translates to mockery of his injury. He points at his own eye, then at Leo, then makes a gesture of something exploding, mocking the grenade that took Leo's eye, finding humor in another man's permanent disfigurement. Other guards notice the tension. One starts to move forward, ready to discipline the prisoners for disrespect. Leo waves him off with a slight gesture. His face shows nothing, no anger, no hurt, no reaction whatsoever. He just stands there, that single eye fixed on the laughing Germans with an intensity that should make them uncomfortable but doesn't, because they're too busy enjoying their joke. The SS soldier who started it keeps going, encouraged by Leo's apparent passivity. He makes more gestures, more jokes. His friends laugh harder. They think they've found a small victory in their defeat, a way to feel superior even as prisoners. They think the one-eyed Canadian guard is too weak or too stupid to respond. Leo says nothing, does nothing. He simply memorizes their faces, burns this moment into his memory alongside all the other slights and wounds and reasons to keep fighting. The laughter doesn't hurt him the way they intend. Instead, it fuels something colder, something more dangerous. They mock his eye patch, never considering what he had to do to lose that eye. They mock his appearance, never asking how a disabled soldier captured 93 of their comrades. An Allied officer eventually orders the mocking prisoners separated and moved to different holding areas, putting an end to the immediate situation. As they're led away, still chuckling among themselves, one of them looks back at Leo and makes one final mocking salute, covering one eye in exaggerated imitation. Leo still doesn't react, but he files this moment away with all the others, the Germans who laughed at the pirate soldier. They'll never know it, sitting in their POW camps for the rest of the war. But they've added fuel to a fire that will soon consume an entire German garrison in Zwolle. A fellow Canadian soldier approaches Leo after the Germans are led away, asking if he's all right, if he wants to report the prisoners for disrespect. Leo shakes his head. He's fine. It doesn't matter. Let them laugh. Words and mockery can't hurt someone who's been through what he's been through. Besides, Leo thinks to himself with grim satisfaction, those particular Germans are out of the war now. They're prisoners. They're done. While he's still fighting, still in the game, still proving every day that losing an eye changed nothing about his ability to be the most dangerous soldier the Germans will ever face. The incident spreads through the Canadian units anyway. Soldiers talk. Stories circulate. Word gets around that some captured SS soldiers mocked Leo Major's eye patch, laughed at the one-eyed Canadian. Veterans who know Leo's reputation shake their heads at the stupidity. New recruits ask what happened. Was there a fight? No fight. Leo just stood there and took it. That somehow makes the story even more impressive to those who understand. The man who captured 93 enemies alone didn't need to prove anything to a few captured soldiers making jokes. His actions speak louder than any response to mockery ever could. But the story also adds another layer to Leo's growing legend. The one-eyed soldier who gets laughed at by Germans and doesn't flinch, who takes the mockery and converts it into motivation, who proves mission after mission that underestimating him is the last mistake enemy soldiers make. In the weeks that follow, as Leo continues his reconnaissance missions, as he pushes deeper into enemy territory and takes more risks and accomplishes more impossible feats, some of his fellow soldiers wonder if that incident with the mocking Germans changed something, made him even more aggressive, even more determined to prove that the eye patch means nothing. Leo never says. He doesn't need to explain himself or his motivations. He just keeps fighting, keeps volunteering for the most dangerous missions, keeps being the soldier everyone wants on their side and no enemy wants to face. Leo Major is becoming a legend, though he himself treats it like just another day's work. When journalists try to interview him, when officers ask him to explain his methods for training purposes, he shrugs and says the Germans weren't expecting one crazy Canadian to take them all on. Fear and surprise, he explains, are better weapons than any rifle. He makes it sound simple, obvious, like anyone could have done the same. But everyone who hears the story knows that's not true. What Leo did requires a specific kind of courage, mixed with tactical genius and pure recklessness in proportions that exist in maybe one soldier in a million. But legends are built on more than one incredible feat. And Leo's greatest moment is still ahead, waiting in a Dutch city called Zwolle, waiting for a spring night in 1945 when grief and rage will combine with military skill to create something that defies all reason. As winter turns to spring in 1945, the war is clearly ending. The Germans are in retreat across Europe, their once mighty Wehrmacht reduced to scattered units fighting desperate defensive actions. Hitler's 1,000-year Reich is collapsing in fire and rubble, its grandiose promises revealed as the lies they always were. But desperate men fight desperate battles, and the liberation of the Netherlands is proving costly. Every city, every town, every bridge is contested. The German forces know they're losing, but many choose to fight to the bitter end anyway, out of fanaticism, fear of what comes next, or simple stubbornness. During this final push through the Netherlands, Leo finds something he didn't expect in war, something he didn't even know he was looking for: genuine friendship. Corporal Willie Arsenault becomes his regular reconnaissance partner after they're paired up for a series of missions in early 1945. They're an odd pair on the surface. Willie is cautious where Leo is bold, methodical where Leo is instinctive, quiet where Leo is brash. But somehow it works. They complement each other, covering each other's blind spots both literally and figuratively. Willie doesn't treat Leo's missing eye as a weakness or even as particularly noteworthy. He adjusts his positioning to cover Leo's blind side naturally, without making a show of it, without treating it like charity. Leo, who grew up without much softness or affection, finds in Willie the brother he never had. They share cigarettes during brief moments of peace, trading stories about their lives before the war. Willie talks about his girlfriend back home, shows Leo her picture, makes plans to open a garage when they finally get to go home. Leo, less certain about his own future, jokes that he'll probably get bored with civilian life and join another war somewhere. Willie tells him he's an idiot and needs to find a nice girl and settle down. In the hell of war, where death is always one bullet away, where friends disappear in explosions or bleed out in muddy fields, this friendship becomes precious beyond measure. They watch each other's backs during missions that should kill them both. They save each other's lives more than once. They develop the kind of wordless communication that comes from trusting someone completely. When Leo goes too far, takes too many risks, Willie pulls him back. When Willie hesitates, overthinking a situation, Leo pushes forward and makes the decision. Together, they become one of the most effective reconnaissance teams in the entire Régiment de la Chaudière. April 1945 arrives. By now, Germany's defeat is only a matter of time, possibly only weeks away. But the fighting continues, bitter and bloody. The city of Zwolle in the eastern Netherlands remains under German occupation. Intelligence reports indicate a significant garrison defending the city, possibly several hundred soldiers with artillery support. They're dug in, prepared to make the Allies pay for every street, every building. The Allied command plans a full assault, which means heavy bombardment followed by a ground invasion. It's standard procedure, proven tactics. It also means Zwolle will be destroyed in the process. its buildings reduced to rubble, its historic architecture erased, its civilians caught in the crossfire. Before the assault begins, before the artillery opens up and turns a living city into a graveyard, the commanders need current intelligence. How many Germans are actually in Zwolle? Where exactly are they positioned? What's their real strength? Rumors and previous reconnaissance suggest anywhere from 200 to 800 enemy soldiers. That's too wide a range for effective planning. They need eyes on the ground, current information, accurate numbers. They send Leo and Willie on a reconnaissance mission. The orders are clear. Scout the city, observe enemy positions, count troops if possible, report back, and above all, don't engage unless absolutely necessary. It should be straightforward, the kind of mission these two have completed dozens of times. Get in quietly, observe, get out quietly. Gather information, not glory. Survive to report what they've seen. The two friends approach Zwolle as dusk settles over the Dutch countryside on April 13th. The city looks almost peaceful from a distance, its church spires rising against the darkening sky, lights beginning to glow in windows as the last daylight fades. If you didn't know there were German soldiers inside, if you couldn't see the military vehicles and defensive positions, you might think it was just another pretty Dutch city waiting for spring to fully arrive. Leo and Willie move carefully through the outskirts, using shadows and ruined buildings for cover. They're good at this. Experienced professionals who know how to move without being seen. They note German positions, counting sentries, observing patrol patterns. Willie sketches maps in a small notebook, marking defensive positions. Leo memorizes everything he sees, his one good eye taking in details that will later help commanders plan their assault. Everything is going according to plan. They're getting the intelligence they need. In another hour, maybe two, they'll slip back out and report their findings. The assault will come tomorrow or the next day, and hopefully it will be quick and overwhelming enough that civilian casualties are minimal. Then a shot cracks through the twilight. Just one shot, but it changes everything. Willie falls, just like that. No warning, no time to react. One moment he's beside Leo, whispering observations about a German machine gun nest they've spotted. The next moment he's on the ground, blood spreading across his uniform, a surprised look on his face like he can't quite believe this is happening. Leo drags him to cover, moving on pure instinct, his mind not yet processing what just happened. He calls Willie's name softly at first, then more urgently. He presses his hands against the wound, trying to stop the bleeding, trying to do something, anything. But he's been in enough firefights, seen enough men die to recognize a mortal wound when he sees one. The bullet caught Willie in the chest, probably hit his heart or a major artery. There's too much blood coming too fast. Willie tries to say something. His lips move, forming words, but no sound comes out. Maybe he's trying to say goodbye. Maybe he's calling for his girl back home. Maybe he's just trying to tell Leo to get out, to run, to survive. But the words never come. His eyes, wide with shock and pain and maybe fear, go distant. The light in them fades. Willie Arsenault, who survived the beaches of Normandy and the hell of the Scheldt and a dozen other battles, who was planning to open a garage and marry his girlfriend and live a long, boring, beautiful life, dies in Leo's arms as German voices shout in the darkness, as more shots ring out, as the mission falls apart into chaos. Leo should retreat. That's what training dictates. That's what any rational soldier would do. The mission is compromised. His partner is dead. German soldiers are alerted and searching for him. The smart play, the only play that makes sense, is to fall back to Allied lines and report what he saw before Willie was killed. The intelligence they gathered is valuable. Commanders need to know about those German positions. Staying here, staying in a hostile city swarming with enemy soldiers actively hunting for him, is suicide. But something breaks inside Leo when Willie dies. Or maybe something that was always there, kept carefully controlled, kept leashed by discipline and friendship and the rules of military engagement, finally breaks free. Grief and rage mix into something cold and terrible and utterly focused. Leo looks at his dead friend, at the blood still spreading across his uniform, at eyes that will never see that garage or that girl. Then he looks toward the city of Zwolle, where German soldiers are shouting orders, organizing search parties, probably congratulating whoever took that shot. And when Willie dies in Zwolle, when Leo makes the decision to liberate that entire city alone, Maybe part of his determination comes from that moment with the mocking Germans. From every German who ever saw his eye patch and thought it meant weakness. From every enemy soldier who underestimated him because of a wound that should have ended his war, but somehow made him more dangerous instead. He makes a decision that defies all military logic, all common sense, all odds. A decision that will either get him killed in the next few hours or make him immortal in the annals of military history. He's not retreating. He's not going back to report and let some artillery barrage avenge Willie. He's going to liberate this city tonight, by himself. For Willie. For the Dutch civilians who'll die if the artillery opens up. For himself. For the rage burning in his chest that needs an outlet before it consumes him. Leo gathers his weapons, moving mechanically, his mind already shifting into combat mode, emotions locked away where they can't interfere with what needs to be done. He's carrying his Sten submachine gun, several magazines of ammunition, grenades hanging from his belt, and his sidearm. Not nearly enough firepower to take on several hundred German soldiers in a fortified position. Not even close. But Leo isn't planning to fight them head-on in conventional terms. That would be suicide. And he's not suicidal. Enraged, yes. Grief-stricken, absolutely. But still thinking tactically, still processing angles and opportunities. He's going to break them psychologically. He's going to make them think they're facing an entire army. Make them see enemies in every shadow, make them panic and break. He's going to turn their own fear against them. Use their exhaustion and stress, and the knowledge that Germany is losing against them. He's going to become the ghost they can't fight, the nightmare they can't escape. As night falls completely over Zwolle, Leo prepares to enter the city alone. He takes a few minutes to say a silent goodbye to Willie, promising things that probably can't be kept, making vows that sound insane, even in his own mind. Then he moves forward, leaving his friend's body hidden in the ruins, knowing he might be joining him in death before the sun rises, but somehow not caring. Death has been chasing him since Normandy. Tonight, he's going to chase it back. The streets of Zwolle are empty when Leo slips into the city proper. Civilians are hiding in their homes, obeying the German curfew, terrified of being caught outside during occupation. German patrols move in predictable patterns. 4-man teams checking streets according to routes that probably haven't changed in weeks. Leo watches them from hiding for a while, learning those routes, timing their movements, identifying the gaps. He's done this 100 times before during reconnaissance missions, but always with the goal of avoiding contact. Tonight he's planning contact, lots of it. The first patrol never knows what hits them. Leo appears from an alley, his Sten gun chattering in the darkness, muzzle flash illuminating his face for a split second. 3 German soldiers fall before they can raise their weapons. The 4th manages to get off one shot that goes wild, then he's down too. Leo takes their ammunition, their grenades, even a German MP-40 submachine gun because having backup weapons is always smart. Then he disappears before reinforcements arrive, melting back into the shadows like he was never there. The Germans find their dead comrades minutes later. They call in more patrols, spreading their forces through the city, searching for the attackers. Attackers, plural, because they assume no one would be insane enough to attack a German garrison alone. They think a commando team has infiltrated, probably a reconnaissance in force preceding a larger Allied assault. Their officers order heightened alert status, more patrols, overlapping coverage. Exactly what Leo wants. Spread them thin, make them chase ghosts. He moves to another part of the city and strikes again. More gunfire. A grenade thrown into a German command post, killing the officer inside and destroying their radio equipment. More ammunition acquired. More confusion sown. The Germans start shooting at sounds, at shadows, sometimes at each other when panicked sentries mistake their own patrols for enemies. The fog of war descends over Zwolle like a physical presence, and Leo is the one creating that fog, one attack at a time. He captures a small group of German soldiers hiding in a building, 5 young conscripts who look terrified even before Leo appears with his gun and his eye patch and his face set in grim determination. He could kill them. Part of him, the part still screaming about Willie's death, wants to kill them, but he has a better tactical use for prisoners. He forces them to march ahead of him at gunpoint, using them as a moving shield while also creating the impression of a larger force herding prisoners through the streets. Other German units see their captured comrades being marched around, and assume a significant Allied force has infiltrated the city. Some retreat to more defensible positions, pulling back from outlying areas and consolidating. That's exactly what Leo wants. Concentrate them, make them think they're being surrounded and need to defend a tighter perimeter. Some try to set up defensive positions, digging in and waiting for the attack they're sure is coming. Leo circles around and attacks them from a completely different direction, making it seem like Allied forces are everywhere, coordinating attacks from multiple vectors. He's everywhere and nowhere, the one-eyed ghost of Zwolle. He throws grenades from rooftops, smashing windows and lobbing them into buildings where German soldiers have taken cover. He fires from windows across the street, then runs through connecting buildings and appears somewhere entirely different before the Germans can respond. He uses captured German weapons, German grenades, creating the auditory confusion of friendly fire, making jumpy soldiers think they're being attacked by their own forces gone rogue in the chaos. At one point, Leo even commandeers a German military vehicle, a small transport truck left running while its crew investigates gunfire nearby. He drives through the streets with reckless abandon, firing the MP-40 one-handed while steering with the other, then abandons the vehicle and attacks from a completely different area minutes later. To the confused and exhausted German garrison, it seems like Allied forces have surrounded the city, are systematically destroying defensive positions, are launching coordinated attacks from all directions. The psychological impact is devastating. These German soldiers have been fighting for years. They've seen their army pushed back from the gates of Moscow, driven out of North Africa, beaten in Italy, forced to retreat across France. They know the war is lost. They're not fighting for victory anymore, just survival, just making it through this nightmare so they can eventually go home, assuming they still have homes to return to. Their nerves are shot. Their morale is non-existent. And now they're being systematically attacked by what they believe is a superior force that somehow infiltrated their supposedly secure position. Officers try to maintain control, shouting orders, trying to organize a coherent defense. But how do you defend against an enemy that seems to be everywhere? How do you hold positions when attacks come from all directions? Their communications are disrupted, some of their radios destroyed, messages getting confused in the chaos. Different units report conflicting information. One patrol says they're under attack from the north. Another reports heavy fighting in the south. A third swears they saw Allied tanks, though no tanks actually exist. Leo has been fighting continuously for hours now. Midnight passes, 1 in the morning, 2, 3. He's running on pure adrenaline, fueled by grief and rage that haven't diminished even slightly. His ammunition is running low, supplemented constantly by taking more from German casualties and prisoners. His body is starting to betray him, muscles cramping, hands shaking from exhaustion. He's thirsty, hungry, covered in dirt and blood. Some of it his from minor cuts and scrapes, most of it from others. But he can't stop, won't stop, because somewhere out there beyond the city limits, Willie's body is getting cold, because Dutch civilians are cowering in their homes waiting for dawn and the artillery barrage that will destroy their city, because German soldiers killed his friend, and they're going to pay for that, going to know what it's like to be hunted, to be terrified, to die far from home with no one to remember them. As dawn approaches, as the sky begins to lighten from black to deep blue to the pale gray that precedes sunrise, the German garrison is breaking. Officers report to their commander that they're taking heavy casualties, that their positions are collapsing, that Allied forces seem to be everywhere in overwhelming numbers. The commander, a veteran officer who should know better but is working with incomplete information and exhausted to the point of irrationality himself, faces an impossible decision. He can order his men to hold, fight to the last, turn Zwolle into a hellish urban battle that will kill everyone involved, including most of the civilian population. Or he can withdraw, preserve his forces, fall back to other German positions and regroup. In any other circumstance, he might have chosen to fight. But this is April 1945. The war is clearly lost. Hitler is probably dead or soon will be. The German high command is fractured and non-functional. What's the point of dying for a regime that's already effectively dead? He orders a retreat. The German forces abandon Zwolle, pulling back during the pre-dawn darkness, convinced they're escaping encirclement by a superior Allied force, grateful to have survived what they believe was a major engagement. They're running from one Canadian corporal with an eye patch and nothing left to lose. As the sun rises over Zwolle on that April morning, Dutch civilians emerge cautiously from their homes. They spent the night listening to gunfire, explosions, shouting in German and occasionally in English or French. They expected to find their city in ruins, destroyed by the battle that clearly raged through the night. Instead, they find their city intact. Damaged, yes, with broken windows and bullet holes and a few small fires still smoking, but intact. Not obliterated by artillery, not reduced to rubble. The Germans are gone. Their vehicles are gone. Their checkpoints are abandoned. Zwolle is liberated. But how? By whom? The civilians venture into the streets, confused, uncertain, hardly daring to believe occupation is actually over. Then they see him, standing in the town square, covered in dirt and blood, exhausted beyond measure, holding a German submachine gun in one hand while using the other to support himself against a wall. A single Canadian soldier with an eye patch. Some think he's a ghost. Others think he's an angel sent by God to deliver them. He's neither. He's just a man who refused to let his friend die for nothing, who channeled grief into action, who understood that sometimes the only way to honor the fallen is to keep fighting for the living. He's Leo Major, and he just accomplished something that military historians will debate and analyze for decades, trying to understand how one man could do what entire battalions sometimes fail to accomplish. Dutch civilians approach him carefully at first, uncertain. Then they realize he's friendly, allied Canadian. They begin to understand what happened, piecing together the impossible truth. This one soldier liberated their entire city, alone, in one night. They start crying, hugging him, offering him water and food. Leo accepts the water, takes a few bites of bread someone provides, but mostly he just stands there, the adrenaline finally wearing off, leaving him feeling hollow and exhausted and still grieving for the friend who didn't live to see this moment. When Allied forces arrive hours later, prepared for a major assault, they find Zwolle already liberated. The commanders are baffled. Where are the German defenders? What happened to the garrison that intelligence said numbered in the hundreds? Where's the battle? Dutch civilians tell tales of a lone soldier fighting through the night, appearing and disappearing like a phantom. Captured German soldiers, interrogated later, describe being overwhelmed by what they thought was a large Allied force conducting coordinated attacks. Slowly, impossibly, the truth emerges. Leo Major, a corporal in the Régiment de la Chaudière, single-handedly liberated a city of tens of thousands of people. He saved Zwolle from the artillery bombardment that would have destroyed it. He saved countless civilian lives. He drove off a German garrison many times his number. And he did it all in one night, driven by grief and will and a refusal to accept the impossible. The military brass wants to award him the Distinguished Conduct Medal, one of the highest honors for bravery in the British Commonwealth, second only to the Victoria Cross itself. It's an award so prestigious that most soldiers who receive it do so posthumously, having died in the acts of heroism that earned the recognition. Leo initially refuses. He says he was just doing his job. He also says, with characteristic bluntness, that he doesn't want to shake hands with British General Montgomery, who he blames for tactical decisions earlier in the war that cost Canadian lives unnecessarily. His superiors eventually convince him to accept the medal, though he never does warm up to Montgomery or British command in general. The ceremony is brief. Leo stands there in his dress uniform, the eye patch stark against his face, while officers read citations describing his actions. Fellow soldiers applaud, knowing they're witnessing history, that they're in the presence of someone truly exceptional. Leo just wants it to be over so he can get back to his unit, back to the routine of soldiering, back to something that feels normal, even though nothing will ever feel truly normal again. The war in Europe ends a few weeks later. On April 30th, Hitler commits suicide in his bunker beneath Berlin, choosing death over capture. On May 7th, Germany officially surrenders. The war that consumed Europe for 6 years, that killed tens of millions, that reshaped the world's political and moral landscape, finally ends. Soldiers who survived begin the long journey home, carrying wounds both visible and invisible, memories both cherished and terrible. Leo returns to Canada carrying more weight than any soldier should bear. The eye patch remains, a permanent reminder of the day a grenade took part of his vision. So do the memories, especially of Willie. So does the grief, the kind that never fully heals but becomes something you learn to live with. A scar on the soul that sometimes aches, but eventually becomes just part of who you are. He's awarded medals, recognized as a hero, gets newspaper interviews and public recognition that makes him deeply uncomfortable. For a while, Leo tries civilian life. He gets married to a woman who sees past the eye patch and the walls he's built around his emotions. They start a family, have children who will grow up knowing their father did something remarkable but never fully understanding what war cost him. Leo works regular jobs, truck driving again, construction, anything that pays and doesn't require him to talk much about his feelings or his past. He tries to be a good husband, a good father, a normal man living a normal life, but war has marked him too deeply. The civilian world feels wrong, too soft, too disconnected from the intensity of combat. He has nightmares about Willie dying, about the night in Svola, about all the men he killed and the friends he lost. He startles at loud noises. He can't tolerate crowds. The skills that made him exceptional in war, the aggression and hypervigilance and inability to accept defeat, don't translate well to peacetime. He gets into fights. He drinks too much sometimes. His marriage suffers under the strain of trying to live with a man who survived war, but can't quite escape it. When the Korean War breaks out in June 1950, when North Korean forces invade South Korea and the United Nations decides to intervene, Leo feels something he hasn't felt in 5 years. Purpose. Maybe it's wrong. Maybe it means he's broken in some fundamental way. Maybe healthy men don't volunteer to return to combat. But Leo enlists again, rejoining the army, going back to the only place where he truly makes sense. His wife is devastated, but not surprised. His children are too young to understand why Daddy is leaving again. Some men learn nothing from war. Leo learned he's a soldier for better or worse. It's what he knows. It's what he's good at. It's the only place where his particular combination of skills and instincts and recklessness is not just accepted, but valued. So in November 1950, at age 29, Leo Major finds himself back in uniform, back in combat, this time on a frozen peninsula half a world away from the European battlefields where he made his name. Korea is different from Europe in almost every way. The weather is more extreme, with summers that feel like being inside an oven, and winters that freeze men solid in their foxholes. The terrain is mountainous and brutal, with hills and ridges that have to be taken and held at terrible cost. The enemy is different too, North Korean and Chinese forces fighting with different tactics, different equipment, different levels of fanaticism than the Germans. But war is still war. Men still die screaming, friends still disappear in explosions, and Leo Major still refuses to quit. He's assigned to the Princess Patricia's Canadian Light Infantry, serving as a sergeant now, given more responsibility because of his experience and his proven abilities. His reputation has preceded him. New soldiers hear stories about the one-eyed corporal who liberated a Dutch city alone, and they think it's exaggerated, a legend grown in the telling. Then they see Leo in action and realize every story understates what he's capable of. In November 1952, Leo and his platoon find themselves defending Hill 355, a strategic position that overlooks crucial supply routes and provides observation of Chinese positions. It's cold, brutally cold, the kind of cold that makes weapons malfunction and turns water to ice instantly. Chinese forces have been probing the UN defenses for weeks, testing for weaknesses, preparing for a major offensive. Intelligence suggests something big is coming, but no one knows exactly when or where. The attack comes at night, as it always seems to. Human wave tactics, thousands of Chinese soldiers charging up the hill in the darkness, blowing horns and bugles, screaming to terrorize the defenders. It's a tactic designed to overwhelm through sheer numbers, accepting horrific casualties in exchange for breaking through enemy lines. Leo and his platoon, maybe 40 men total, face what looks like an endless tide of humanity charging up the frozen slope. Leo takes command, not officially but practically, because in combat, rank matters less than competence and courage. He organizes the defense, positioning machine guns for maximum coverage, ensuring ammunition is distributed properly, telling men when to fire and when to conserve ammo. He personally leads counterattacks when Chinese forces get too close, charging down the hill with a rifle in hand, shooting and fighting hand to hand, then falling back to the defensive line before getting cut off. The first night is hell. Wave after wave of Chinese soldiers attack. The snow turns red with blood. Bodies pile up on the frozen slope. The Canadian position holds but barely. When dawn finally comes, bringing a temporary lull in the fighting, Leo counts his casualties. Several men dead, more wounded, everyone exhausted, operating on adrenaline and fear. And the Chinese will attack again tonight, and the night after, until they either take the hill or decide the cost is too high. For 3 days and nights, this pattern repeats. Attack, defend, counterattack, hold the line. Leo is everywhere, directing fire, encouraging exhausted men, dragging wounded soldiers to cover, making split-second decisions that mean life or death for his platoon. He goes without sleep, without proper food, functioning on coffee and cigarettes and pure stubborn refusal to let his position fall. His men start to believe he really is invincible, that nothing can kill Leo Major because death itself is afraid of him. When relief finally arrives on the 4th day, when fresh Canadian troops climb Hill 355 expecting to find it overrun or abandoned, they find it still in Canadian hands. The position is surrounded by Chinese casualties, hundreds of bodies on the frozen slopes. Leo and his men are beyond exhausted, looking more like ghosts than soldiers. But they held. Against overwhelming odds, against days of continuous assault, they held. For this action, Leo receives a 2nd Distinguished Conduct Medal. He becomes one of only 3 Canadian soldiers in history to receive this honor twice, joining an incredibly exclusive club of warriors recognized for exceptional valor in separate conflicts. The first medal was for liberating Zwolle alone. The second is for holding Hill 355 against impossible odds. Together, they tell the story of a man who simply doesn't know how to give up, who faces challenges that should kill him and somehow, improbably, survives and succeeds. After Korea, Leo finally retires from military service for good. He's in his early 30s but feels decades older. 2 wars have taken their toll. His body carries scars from multiple wounds. His mind carries memories that wake him screaming sometimes. The eye patch has been part of his face for nearly a decade now, so familiar he barely notices it anymore. He returns to Canada permanently, back to his family, determined to make civilian life work this time. It's not easy. It never is for men who've seen what Leo has seen, done what he's done. The transition from warrior to civilian requires skills he doesn't possess, emotional tools he was never given. But he tries. He works hard, provides for his family, shows up every day even when civilian life feels meaningless compared to the intensity of combat. His children grow up knowing their father is different, that there are stories people tell about him, but not really understanding what it all means. Leo doesn't talk much about his experiences. When people ask about the eye patch, he keeps his answers brief, deflecting with humor or changing the subject. The man who terrified German garrisons and held off Chinese human wave attacks becomes a quiet civilian, working regular jobs, living in a regular house, trying his best to be regular when he's anything but. But the people of Zwolle don't forget. In the Netherlands, Leo Major is remembered as a hero, a legend, the man who saved their city when he had every reason to retreat and leave it to be destroyed. In 1970, the city of Zwolle names a street after him, Leo Majorlaan, ensuring his name will be part of their geography forever. When Leo visits years later, elderly Dutch citizens who remember that April night in 1945 treat him like royalty. They cry when they meet him, thanking him for their lives, for their city, for the future he gave them when he could have simply walked away. Children in Zwolle learn his story in school, studying how one determined soldier accomplished what seemed impossible. His image appears in local museums, the eye-patched Canadian who became a Dutch folk hero. The city erects monuments. Commemorations are held. For people whose city was saved from destruction, Leo Major isn't just a soldier who did something remarkable. He's a symbol of courage and sacrifice, proof that one person acting with determination can change the course of history. Leo accepts the honors with characteristic discomfort. He never quite understands why people make such a fuss. He was doing his job. He was avenging a friend. He was too stubborn to quit. That's how he explains it when pressed, making it sound simple when everyone knows it was anything but. The Dutch people understand what he doesn't quite admit, that his actions were extraordinary, that most people in his situation would have retreated, that he gave them a gift beyond price. Back in Canada, Leo's recognition is more muted but no less real. Veterans organizations honor him. Military historians study his actions, trying to understand his tactics and psychology. His 2 Distinguished Conduct Medals make him legendary among those who understand military history. But Leo remains fundamentally uncomfortable with attention, preferring to fade into the background, to be just another veteran trying to live a quiet life. The years pass. The 20th century moves through the Cold War, through social upheavals, through technological changes that transform society. Leo ages, his hair graying, his body slowing down, the old wounds aching more as decades accumulate. His wife stays with him through everything, understanding him in ways no one else can. His children become adults, have children of their own, creating a family legacy that extends beyond medals and military actions. In 2008, at age 87, Leo Major passes away quietly in a hospital bed, far from the battlefields that defined so much of his life. He survives battles that killed thousands, missions that should have been suicide, injuries that would have ended other men's careers. In the end, time accomplishes what German soldiers and Chinese armies could not. The warrior finally rests. His funeral brings together an unlikely assembly. Canadian military honors mix with Dutch remembrances. Representatives from Zwolle attend, flying across the Atlantic to pay respects to the man who gave their city a future 63 years earlier. Veterans salute, old men remembering when they were young and terrified and grateful that Leo Major was on their side. Civilians mourn a hero they only knew through stories and medals and the quiet pride he carried. Obituaries around the world tell his story, introducing new generations to the one-eyed soldier who liberated a city alone, who captured 93 enemy soldiers by himself, who held an impossible position against overwhelming odds. The Toronto Star calls him the Canadian Rambo. International media picks up the story, fascinated by a real-life warrior whose exploits sound too extraordinary to be true, but are documented in official military records. Military historians debate his legacy, analyzing his tactics, his psychology, trying to understand what made Leo Major capable of accomplishments that seem superhuman. Some attribute it to exceptional tactical skill. Others point to his psychological makeup, the stubbornness and aggression that might have made him difficult in civilian life, but proved invaluable in combat. Most conclude that Leo represents a perfect storm of factors: skill, plus determination, plus situational awareness, plus a fundamental inability to accept defeat, all combined in one scarred, one-eyed package that refused to break no matter how much pressure was applied. The story doesn't end with his death. If anything, it grows stronger as time passes and the raw impossibility of his actions becomes clearer in historical perspective. Modern special forces study his tactics in Zwolle, trying to understand how one man created the illusion of a much larger force. Military psychologists examine his ability to function under extreme stress. Historians write books and articles analyzing his impact on the liberation of the Netherlands. In Zwolle, his memory is cherished and maintained. New generations learn his story, ensuring that the one-eyed Canadian who saved their city remains part of their collective identity. The street bearing his name is maintained, the monuments kept clean, his story told to schoolchildren who listen wide-eyed to tales of a real-life hero who did impossible things. Because that's what Leo Major represents in the end. Not just military skill, though he had that in abundance. Not just courage, though no one can doubt his bravery. He represents the idea that individuals matter, that one determined person can change outcomes that seem predetermined, that refusing to accept defeat sometimes makes victory possible when all logic says it should be impossible. The Germans who laughed at his eye patch learned too late what Leo Major really represented. Not weakness, not disability, but focus refined to a razor's edge, determination that couldn't be broken, the ability to turn loss into strength and grief into action. They laughed at the pirate-eyed soldier and he responded by becoming the nightmare they couldn't escape, the ghost they couldn't kill, the one-man army they couldn't defeat. History remembers the great generals who commanded armies, the political leaders who made strategic decisions, the massive battles involving hundreds of thousands of soldiers. But sometimes history is changed by one person who refuses to accept the impossible, who looks at overwhelming odds and decides to fight anyway, who loses an eye and keeps both eyes on the mission, who loses a friend and saves a city in response. That person was Leo Major. the one-eyed liberator, the reluctant hero, the soldier who proved that courage isn't about being unafraid. It's about being terrified and doing what needs to be done anyway. It's about taking your pain and your loss and your anger and channeling them into something that matters. It's about standing alone against the darkness and refusing to blink, even with only one eye to see with. His name is carved in stone in Zwolle, spoken with reverence by Dutch citizens, recorded in Canadian military history, studied by soldiers and historians worldwide. But perhaps his greatest legacy isn't in the monuments or the medals or the history books. It's in the idea he represents. That ordinary people, properly motivated and absolutely determined, can accomplish extraordinary things. That one person can make a difference even when facing impossible odds. That refusing to give up sometimes makes all the difference between victory and defeat, between life and death, between a city saved and a city destroyed. Leo Major never considered himself a hero. He was just doing his job, avenging a friend, too stubborn to quit. But history and the people he saved know better. He was extraordinary, a warrior whose deeds seem impossible but are documented fact, a man who changed the course of battles and saved thousands of lives through sheer determination and tactical brilliance. The pirate-eyed soldier they laughed at became the legend they couldn't forget. And his story, impossible but true, stands as testament to what human beings are capable of when they refuse to surrender, refuse to quit, refuse to accept that some things can't be done. Leo Major did them anyway. One eye, one man, one impossible night that changed everything. If you found this incredible true story inspiring, make sure to subscribe to our channel for more untold tales of courage and determination from history. Hit that like button and drop a comment below telling us what you think about Leo Major's unbelievable one-man mission. What would you have done in his situation? Let us know, and we'll see you in the next story.